Texas Senator Ted Cruz becoming the first candidate to announce officially that he's in the race. He's running for president. He's a first-term senator, and he will officially declare that candidacy in a speech just about an hour away. That's Liberty University, where they're getting ready to do just that. About 10:25 is when it's expected to get underway. The Tea Party favorite jumping into this ring a little bit early. It's expected to get rather crowded over the next 4 weeks or so, though. And unlike other potential contenders, he's doing so without first launching an exploratory committee. So does that make sense for him? Karl Rove joins us. He worked as senior advisor, of course, and Deputy White House Chief of Staff to President George W. Bush. He's also a Fox News contributor. Karl, good morning. How you doing?
Morning. How are you?
I'm doing great. So today, this is officially getting off the ground, and Ted Cruz is the first one to say that he's going to do this. Does it matter that he didn't do the exploratory committee first?
No, it doesn't. It might have helped him for later, but look, he's willing to do this now rather than wait until he does the exploratory committee because, first of all, he gets to be the first. I mean, nobody else has jumped into the race except Ben Carson has announced that he's going to run. He's going to and filed an exploratory committee. So he gets a lot of attention. Second of all, it's an interesting anniversary. It's the anniversary of the Affordable Care Act, and I think we can expect to see a lot of talk in his speech about his opposition to the Obamacare and his willingness to lead the country to repeal every single word, as he says. Yeah. He also has an enthusiastic crowd. I've spoken at Liberty University. The convocation is mandatory attendance, so he'll have 10,000 kids in the room. Some of them are not kids. Some of them are in their 20s and mid-20s, but he will have an enthusiastic crowd, and it will give him a window. Easter's coming up in a couple of weeks. We're likely not to see anybody else announce until after Easter, so he's going to have a window where there's going to be a lot of coverage about him, and he hopes to take advantage of that.
All right. So money, in many ways, shows support, shows how much gumption you've got, what you've got following you around. $50 million is what you need, right? I mean, he's got to have somewhere in that ballpark in order to get through the first primaries, to do Iowa, South Carolina, to really be a player in those. Do you think he will be able to get that kind of financial support?
Well, it's going to be a big test, and we'll see in mid-July when he will file numbers. He's announcing today there'll be a modest report at the end of the month, April 15th through March 31st, but the real test will be in July. They're very explicit in the papers today about they're going to raise $50 million and how they're going to raise it. They're going to raise $10 million online, $10 million from the mail, $20 million from bundlers. I mean, they're very precise about how they're going to go about doing it. They've laid down a marker, and we'll see what kind of progress they make. But you're right. Look, just simply running 4 weeks of television in each of the 4 February states, Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and Nevada, will cost you $4 million a week, or $16 million just for television. With the other kinds of activity, it's likely to be probably $20, $22, $23 million just to compete in those primaries in January and February, plus the cost of getting from here to there, which ought not to be underestimated. You move the candidate around the country, you build an organization, you do research, you raise money, you have to comply with federal laws. All that's pretty expensive. So, yeah, it's going to take probably $30 or $40 million to get to March 1st, and then on March 1st, bam, it is there. Yeah. There are 11 primaries now scheduled to be there, including Ted Cruz's home state of Texas appears to be likely to be voting on the 1st of March. And in the first part of March, there are 14 primaries. It's going to be $30 million to buy a couple of weeks of TV in those 14 states.
A lot of money, a lot of work, a lot of shaking hands, a lot of phone calls that need to be taking place for all of these folks. How does he stack up? I know you've got a whiteboard to show us, Karl. How does he look right now compared to some of these others? Because there's a lot of folks out there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, March 5th, first of all, remember, a lot of these head-to-head polls really don't matter because it's early. And he's got some terrific strengths that I want to come back to in a moment. But if you look at March 5th, NBC Wall Street Journal poll, 40% of Republicans said they could support him. 38% said they could not. 18% didn't know him. This meant, in terms of if you look at the percentage of people who said they could support him, he ranked 8th among Republicans. Marco Rubio, Scott Walker, Mike Huckabee, Jeb Bush, Rand Paul, Rick Perry, and Ben Carson all ranked ahead of him. So one of the reasons he's jumping out now is so he can solidify this number, drive this number so that it reduces, this reduces, and all hopefully ends up here. The second thing is Texas. There are recent poll out in Texas, and Cruz leads in Texas, his home state, 20% to Scott Walker's 19, to 9% for both Jeb Bush and Ben Carson, and 8% for Governor Rick Perry of Texas. Now, that on the surface looks okay, but last October, Cruz led here 27% to 2% for Scott Walker. So it shows the advantage of getting out there and taking this window in which there'll be a lot of attention for him for a week or 10 days and see if he can drive those numbers in a good direction.
That's an interesting point. What about his likability? What do you think about that factor for him, Karl?
Well, this is where candidates over the course of time, this is where we develop an opinion. Are we comfortable with them? There are a couple of things about Ted Cruz. First of all, he is really, really smart. This is a Princeton graduate, magna cum laude from Harvard Law School. He is really smart. He's incredibly articulate. He was a college debate champion and is a very accomplished speaker. And third of all, I think it's interesting, he's come up with a label to help take what might be considered in some quarters a disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. And that is the label that he's using of courageous conservatives. He says, I want to lead a movement of courageous conservatives to restore our country. This is an effort to take his role in the shutdown in 2013 and turn it into a positive by saying, in essence, I had the courage to take on this issue.
Yeah, it's an interesting, you think about compassionate conservatism, and he seems to be coining this phrase, courageous conservatism. We'll see how he does today, but it's going to be really interesting. Karl, thank you so much. Great background here as we head into this big announcement. We'll see you next time. Bye, Karl.
You bet.